All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Dean. You're watching the Prince Podcast. And before we continue, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button down below and check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/podcastjuice. All right, with that, let's work it like a job. Peace.
You know, it's just not where I'm at. And to be personally honest, he wasn't too thrilled with that answer. Not just because it was me, but Prince was, like a lot of rock stars, and like a person that happens to be, unfortunately, be our president right now, he's a guy that doesn't like to be told no.
Okay.
So it was like Prince said, well, okay, I guess I'm done. I said, so Prince, you know, all the luck. I wish you the best of luck. And I saw Prince between that was I think it was fall of 2003. Between that time and when he passed away last year, I saw Prince once for all of like 2 or 3 minutes. And we were very cordial. It was like, you know, actually Paul and I were doing an LP music gig out at Paisley Park one night, and Prince came by the sound check and came up behind me, threw his arms around me, gave me a hug, said, "How you doing?" I said, "Good, man. How you been?" Everything. And you know, 2 or 3 minutes later, he was gone, and that was the last time I saw him, and the only time that I'd seen him in the last 12, 13 years. So,
wow, man.
Yeah. So you know, so the way I look at it, yeah, I left on my own terms, you know, and I have no, you know, like I say, the significance of what my association with him meant for me is it's a matter of record. So I mean, you know, well, I was fortunate. I was lucky to be there.
It was almost like, you know, that whole Prince, it was like a college, and y'all graduated, y'all alumni, and everybody sort of created relationships through that. Like you met everybody, you know what I'm saying? Everybody met each other through that, you know what I'm saying? And you all went on to do your things. But I respected what you say. You know, I would just say, you know, yeah, he could have went and got somebody else, but you know, the reality facts is he got you, and you're part of. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so I understand you being humble. I get it, man. Like, but you are a part of it, man. Like you're part of the things.
Well,
like
you know, it's funny. It's funny because you know, it's people come up to me, you know, the diehard fans, and they tell me things or recollections about you know their favorite gigs or and you know a lot of they'll say, well, I remember when I saw you guys in Detroit on such and such a night, and I'm saying, well, that's cool. I don't have a clue as to what you're talking about. I have no recollection. You know, it was just another gig. Now, I understand that because that's how I was with James Brown and Maceo and all those guys. I once got into an argument with Maceo. See, Maceo had come into James Brown's band. Alan, by the way, is you know Alan is known as the archivist of the history of James Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, and he basically makes a living off of doing that at times. I mean, you know, I mean, he's got a book ready to come out. But anything that anybody needs to know about James Brown's entire career, they go to Alan for the answers about that. So a lot of the stuff that I know, I just know because of Alan. But for example, Maceo began working in James Brown's band in the spring of 1964. He's with James Brown for a little over a year, because in the late summer 1965, Maceo went into the service, and he was and he played in an army band or something for a few years. He got early release from the service in spring of 1967, and immediately went back to work with James. The very first recording session that he did with James after coming back out of the Army was a recording session for Cold Sweat, which of course was one of the most significant songs in the history of American pop music. It was, you know, I mean, I'm sorry. You know, without Cold Sweat, there's no hip hop, there's no, you know, there's no P-Funk, I mean, that was, you know. So anyway, Maceo and I were just kicking it one day, and we were talking about, and I was asking him about his experiences in the service and the Army band that he played in and everything. And he just mentioned, he said, yeah, when I got out of the service in 1968, and I stopped him, I said, no, Mace, you got out in 67. And he looked at me and said, no, man, I got out in 68. I said, Maceo, I said, you got on in 67 because your first recording session was Cold Sweat, and Cold Sweat was released in June of 1967. And Maceo started getting mad. I said, Eric, How are you going to tell me about me? And I said, Mace, I'm sorry. You got out of the Army in May of 1967. And finally he sat there for a minute and he said, you know something? I think you're right.
Well, fuck you.
Now, you got to understand, Maceo with James Brown would be on the road like 300 nights a year, year after year after year. They all blur.
Right.
You know, it's just like, I don't know what year I did that, but I do because I was a diehard fan.
Mm-hmm.
I lived and breathed on that shit, just like all the Prince fans. So I understand the perspective.
Right. Okay.
You know? Yeah. But that's what's funny to me because I said, yeah, I get it because, like I say, but y'all got to understand this is what that music meant for me. Mm-hmm. That's what enabled me to do for Prince what I could do.
And that's why I was, when earlier on, when you mentioned that Ray Charles was, like a Prince to you. And I remember that because I was like, cool, because this is how we kind of see you as associate of what that is to us. And so that's why, that's the whole point of be here is like, yo, man, I'm not going to say we never, but to hear you talk about it and to really get some of the answers and unlock some of the mysteries, it means a lot to us. Unfortunately, Prince isn't here anymore. So now we have to go to people such as yourself, Andre, Jill, whoever, to really kind of
we can just make the shit up. So,
hey, I had to go by your words, but you understand what I'm saying.
No, I'm just sitting back. I said, I wonder what Prince would really say about any of us.
Well, that's a whole other story, right?
Eric, now give me a break. I'd indulge him. He wasn't all that. I remember the Eric, the days where Eric would, be just being a royal pain in my ass or whatever, So I don't know.
Hey, keep it real.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that maybe Prince never was able to finish his memoir.
Oh wow! Well, too.
It definitely could be a two-way street.
Yeah. Well, Prince was a man. He was a human being. So, when you say that he was going at people, that doesn't surprise me. We all go at each other, and he ain't no angel. But nobody is. So
no, not hardly. Yeah.
So I get that. Wow, man. I want to double back, and hopefully we got a little time to speak on this. We'd be remiss not to go into this, but Madhouse, to really go into it. First of all, my understanding is that you didn't really care for that first Madhouse album. Is that true?
No, I didn't. And I try to qualify that because I do understand that people, they're really into that music, and I am hardly trying to suggest that whatever the value that anyone hears in that music should be dismissed just because it didn't work for me. Because at the end of the day, my opinion, even of stuff that I might be involved in, is like, everyone's got an opinion, like we all got an asshole. And that's all it is. So I'm not casting any aspersions on the legitimacy or the value of the music, particularly, since I was a part of it. I'll give you a story to kind of give you a perspective on that. Growing up, when I was listening to Wayne Shorter and cats like that, I've got pretty much anything that Wayne Shorter ever recorded in his entire career. And he recorded a series of albums under his own name on Blue Note Records during the 60s that for those of us growing up in the jazz world, they're all just iconic albums because he was just such a great composer, player, and they were just cutting-edge albums. And me and my buddies, growing up, we just listened to those albums all the time. And then years later, I saw, I forget if I read the interview, but somebody told me that they had read an interview with Wayne, in which the interviewer had asked Wayne about one of these Blue Note albums that he'd done about maybe 10 years before this interview. And the interviewer was saying, it was such an iconic album, whatever. I forget what album it was. And Wayne looked at the guy and says, oh, man, that was music to vacuum rugs by.
Damn.
Like I'm sitting here and I said, oh, my God, I love this album. Or, this is like one of my favorite albums. And he's like dissing it. And then I said, okay, well, wait a minute. That was 10 years ago. So why on earth would Wayne Wayne's in a different place now. He's got 10 years more different stories that he wants to tell. So it's not that he's like just saying, oh, no, it's a bunch of crap. It's just basically his way of saying, I'm in a different place now. And what was pertinent to me, or what I was involved in this, and this is so it's cool then. My attitude towards Madhouse is a little bit like that. Now, you have to understand also that my role, here's the thing where I basically have to put it out. People, they want to refer to me sometimes as Mr. Madhouse. Eric, that's Mr. Madhouse. No.
Right.
Prince was Mr. Madhouse. Madhouse was Prince's project. Now, I know all of the stories that went out about, all the fake names that we came up with for the people that played on the first Madhouse album and all that stuff. That was Prince's joke. And it got a little carried away with it, but, the first Madhouse album, it was all him, except for obviously my horns and the flute. And what happened was we had come off the Hit and Run tour, and Prince called me one day, and he said to me, would you like to come over to my house and play some jazz? And I'm saying, what? It was like that wasn't a comment that I would have necessarily expected. Would you like to come over and play some jazz? And it was like it was. I want to think it was a Sunday afternoon. I don't know. It was just like, well, okay. Now, I hadn't been there long enough that I was going to say, oh, no, man, I'm sorry, I don't feel like it today. I was, still like, okay, Prince is, I didn't interpret it as a request. It's like, Prince needs me to come over because he's got some music he needs me to play. So I got in the car and went over to his house, and this was before Paisley was built, so we were still working in the basement of his house where he had the studio at that time. And we sat at the piano in his living room, and he started playing me these songs on piano. And he said, you got some music paper? I said, yeah. I said, okay, let's sit. We got to figure out some melodies. And I said, well, okay. So he starts dictating and playing on piano melodies, and I'm writing them down. So we went through, I think, 3 or 4 songs. And I'm thinking that, okay, we're going to go downstairs, I guess, and we're going to start to record some stuff. Well, we went downstairs, and they already had 4 tracks done. They were already done. So he says, okay, let's go. Get your horn. So he's sitting in the control booth. It's him, Susan Rogers, and myself. So all of a sudden, I'm playing the melodies and playing solos. Okay, I need you got it. Play solo. Here's a melody. Here's a little arrangement. Let's come up with a few parts here. And at the end of the day, we got 4 songs done. Well, the next day I came in. We did a few more. I'll tell you what, there was one story. We had been working until about 3 a.m, and finally we were done with whatever we had finished. And I got in the car and I drove home. I got home, and my apartment at the time was maybe about a 15-minute drive from his house. So I get home. It's maybe about 4 a.m. now. I'm in bed. I'm just literally just got my hand on the light switch, ready to turn it off, and the phone rings. And I said, "Oh, I know who that is." And it was Susan, and she said, "Prince needs you to come back." And I said, "Susan, I'm in bed. I'm turning off the light. Please tell him I'll come back tomorrow afternoon." Hung up the phone. 2 minutes, 30 seconds later, phone rings again. I pick it up, and it's Prince. And he's laughing. He said, "Come on, man. I got another track. Come on back. Please, please, come on back. Come on." So I said, "Okay." I mean, I knew, because in another minute, me telling him no, it was going to be like, "Eric, get your ass over here now." I've seen that movie before. So I said, "All right." So I got out of bed, threw some clothes on, was back in his house. In the hour and a half that between the time that I had left, gotten in my bed, had to get back up and get back, he had the track for 6 done.
Man.
The whole track done.
Beast.
Yeah. Now, I never liked what I played on that track because, first of all, I was pissed off. I didn't want to be there. I was tired. And all I wanted to do was get that over as soon as I could so I could get back in my car, go back to sleep. So, now, if everybody loves what I play on that, fine. I'm glad because, I want you to like it. I didn't because...
You was mad when you did it, huh?
Tired and I was pissed.
And that song goes on to be kind of a hit, right? I mean,
it did. It was a top 10 R&B hit.
Yeah.
I got paid well for it. I'm glad you love it. You know.
I know you cashed them checks.
but here's the thing. Once again, I had a ball working with him on that album because it's just Prince and me sitting kicking it in the studio. But here's the difference. At no point in time was Prince coming to me and saying, "Hey, Eric, I got this idea of doing an instrumental project that's going to feature you. What do you want to do with it?" See, that question wasn't asked. Now, I'm not suggesting it was supposed to, because Madhouse was no different from anything else that he would do. And my role and my job was to do any and everything he needed me to do for that music, which was no different than if it was a song like Housequake or any other song that he would bring me in to put a horn arrangement or put a solo. If it was a Prince song, it was a Prince song. The difference, of course, is that this is a project that is going to be marketed as mine, when in actuality it really wasn't. Now, I understood that, and I'm fine with that, because basically this is what my job is. And certainly it was to my benefit, and I was extremely complimented, because, look, he didn't go to anyone else in the band and say, "Hey, I'm going to do a project that features you." It came to me.
Right.
So first of all, I'm saying, cool. So now once again, the process was fun, because we did that whole album in 2.5 days.
Damn.
You know, I mean, it was a bam, just hit it out and done. I really, really did like the title song 8, the last song of the album.
Yes.
That I really liked. And it was, but you have to understand too that all of us who were involved in making music, regardless if it's our own music or music that we're playing for somebody else, we all have our limited perspective. I guarantee you that any song that any of us apprentices that we might have played on, I'd say the same thing about me. I'd say the same thing about Wendy, or any, because Wendy and Lisa had a lot to do with quite a bit of the music that was done at that period of time, and Around the World and the Parade albums and that stuff. But if Prince is playing us, the final mix on that stuff, we're all listening first and foremost to what we're doing on it. You know, if there's a Prince song that got a horn solo, screw the song. How's my solo? Is my solo cool? That's like, So it's like, I don't care if the song's okay. Is the solo cool? Fine, I'm good with that. I mean, we're all egotists. Right. That's who we are. That's what we do. Now, so I'm listening to all of this. So I'm listening to that. So I come out of the studio with the Madhouse album, and I'm on cloud 9. I said, wow. And first of all, we had done stuff, we had done all those flesh sessions, so I'm standing there, will this stuff really even be released? Well, sure enough. He came back to me the day after and said, Warner Brothers is cool with it. They heard the album, they want to release it. I said, okay, it's done deal.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, I got a contract now, which is giving me a piece of it, too. So I said, oh, well, this is found money, because 2 days ago, I'm on salary and I'm getting paid for all of it, but now I'm getting paid as an artist for this stuff. So, yeah, I like all of this. Plus the obvious fact that it's going to get I'm going to have a notoriety and a visibility that I wouldn't have had, even just like being a sideman in his band. So why wouldn't I love this? Absolutely. The only problem was that after a period of time of listening to the music, I just came to a conclusion that for me, it just wasn't necessarily music that I was that thrilled with. And that's just a personal opinion.
Okay.
Just because after a while, after the initial excitement about this project and all it could mean for me, and the fact that, I'm the one sitting in the studio with this guy. There are thousands of musicians that would give their eye teeth to be where I am right now. And I'm the guy that he's coming to wanting to do this with. So how am I going to sit back and just say, well, Prince, I'm not really crazy about this? No. It's like, yeah, you got more? Sure, let's go.
That's right.
So, but once after a period of time, you got to understand that even the musicians that we are, we can become a little bit detached from even what we do. There isn't anything that I've ever done on my own that I can't look at and say, yeah, that was cool, but, if I were doing that today, maybe I'd do that a little different. Maybe I do it a little better than whatever. You look at things from a perspective. So I'm looking at that, and I'm saying it was all Prince's music, and that's fine, because I didn't expect it, necessarily anything else. But I said, I just kind of looked at it as every other Prince project. Some of the stuff I'm going to like, and some of it I'm not. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what I think about any of that. It's what the people think. So, after that got out that I wasn't that thrilled with the album, I said, maybe that's something I shouldn't really been that honest about. Because I really, because I know there are people that come up to me and say, wow, this album's the greatest thing I ever heard. And, I'm not really interested in telling you, really? I thought it was a bunch of crap. I'm not going to say.
Damn. Well, I'm one of them people.
I don't feel that. I'm just saying that, I am allowed to have my own opinion about anything that I'm involved in, just because I'm listening to it as if I had bought that album and taken it home and listened to it, what would I have thought about it? I would have said, I like that. I wasn't too crazy about this.
Right.
And even if it's me. Now, from my perspective, I'll be absolutely honest with you. I don't really care for anything that I played on that album other than what I played on 8.
Damn.
All the other stuff that I played on, I didn't think it was my best work. I would have loved to actually have had a second shot at some of that stuff. But, Prince moves fast, and I understand that. And that's the wonderful thing about working with Prince. Because basically, whatever solo that I'm going to play, you get one shot. So you better come with your A game. And maybe I don't know. I just never felt that I was on my A game with most of that stuff. And like I say, on 6, I was tired and I was pissed. So I'm hardly comparing my A game on that. Maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if I had a good 8 hours sleep, maybe I'd come in and maybe I would have done something that would have been. Now, but the important thing is, Prince was cool with it. So there's the other standpoint is like, this is still his music, and my job is still the same. I have to give him what he's looking for. And if this is what he's cool with, then I'm cool with that.
Right.
Now, the second Madhouse album was somewhat of a different story, because the second Madhouse album was more like the Flesh Sessions. We went in with Sheila, Prince, Levi, and myself, and we went in and started to jam. And we basically constructed most of those songs, all 4 of us. So there was a lot much more give and take. Prince would give, Sheila, give us a groove. Just give us a groove, and we'll just start playing. And then within a few minutes, I might come up with a line, and Prince said, that's a cool line. Change a couple notes. Prince has got a keyboard line. Levi's got a bass line. And all of a sudden, within a few minutes, we got something that we said, we cool with this? All right, stop tape. Now let's hit it. We got to put a form together. We'll do the melody 2 or 3 times. We got a little bridge here. Eric, you got the first solo. I'll take the second one. Let's roll. And that's how most of the second Madhouse album was done.
Okay.
So from my standpoint, I liked. There were a couple of things on the second Madhouse album I wasn't that crazy about, but overall, I really liked most of what was on the second Madhouse album. But once again, that's personal taste. I understand there were a lot of people that prefer the first Madhouse album because it's got a lot of the quirky stuff that Prince is known for, And I understand that personality of his was very much present on that album. The third Madhouse album that we had actually recorded was actually kind of like the first one in that he had all the tracks done and he just brought me in to plug my stuff into it. But as I was saying, after we came off the road from the Lovesexy tour and we had done that third Madhouse album, I didn't hear anything more about it. So when Prince asked Alan to ask me what I thought about it, that told me that maybe Prince was having second thoughts about it. So I told Alan, I said, tell Prince that I'd like to go in the studio and maybe remix a couple things. And so Alan got back to me and said, Prince said, that's fine. He said, go in and screw around with it, which really told me that Prince was maybe starting to have second thoughts about it. Before I could even get in the studio to do anything on it, Prince called me and said, let's scrap that one and start over. I said, oh, okay, cool. Now, that was fine with me because I really wasn't that thrilled with the third one either. There was some stuff on it. It was sequenced as a vinyl album because that was still vinyl in those days. So one side of it had 4 songs on it. The other side was going to be what was called the Dopamine Rush Suite, which was like a 17 or 18-minute thing.
Yeah.
There were parts of that I liked. Most of the rest of the album I wasn't that crazy about. So I said, oh, cool, this is good. So this keeps the project alive because it was still in my interest to do another Madhouse album. But it was like, okay, now we can start from scratch. Oh, maybe, maybe we get some better music. more or music that maybe... Anyway, what happened between that and over the next few weeks is that Prince then called me out, and we had a meeting, and we sat down, and Prince handed me 4 cassettes, old analog, back in the day, we were still dealing with cassettes. Mm-hmm. 4 cassettes filled with about 40 pieces of music from the vault.
Damn.
I still have those cassettes. All unfinished stuff, all instrumental stuff, some of which might have been 3, 4, 5 years old. Some of the things were actually outtakes from the sessions that we had done for the second Madhouse album, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And he gave me a sheet of paper which he had written down a whole bunch of notes and ideas for things. And he said, take these 4 cassettes, and he said, start here. Listen to these cassettes. Anything from this stuff that you want to use, go ahead and use. Wow. Do any and everything you want to do with any of this stuff. Anything that you don't like, throw it aside. If you have enough for an album, fine. If you don't, then we'll start to find some other stuff.
Man.
But he said, start here. Now, I'm thinking, well, this is different because this is the first time that he had come to me in Madhouse and said, you got it. Start, here are the tracks, go for it. So I looked at him and I said, you must be busy. And he said, and yeah, he had just gotten handed the Batman project.
Mm.
So he was going to be busy creating all this music, ostensibly, which ended up being, his Batman album. Also, he was in the very early stages of ideas for what became the Graffiti Bridge movie and project, which happened the next year. And he had a deadline for this Batman. He had to get this stuff done quick because the movie was almost done and was going to be released in like a couple months, so he had to get this stuff turned in quick. So he was busy. So I said, okay. Now, the only thing is that I'm getting started on all this stuff, and I'm thinking, well, at any given time, Prince could come in and take any and everything that I've been doing and completely change it or throw it out and start over. So I'm saying, I don't know how deep emotionally I want to invest myself in what I'm doing because he could come in and scrap everything and just start over. But as the summer went by, I realized that I wasn't hearing from him. He was off busy. So I said, well, okay, in for a dime, in for a dollar. I'll just run with this stuff. So over a period of a few months, I started taking some of the songs and reworking and ended up did a lot of post-production on a lot of this stuff. And then I took the Dopamine Rush Suite, which I like part of it, and I chopped it up. I took 10 minutes out of it. I basically went to the whole thing. I said, I like this, I don't like that, I like this, I don't like that, and I squeezed all the stuff together that I liked, and that was the new Dopamine Rush.
Wow.
And fortunately, he approved. I was a little leery about that because this was a finished thing of his that I was basically saying, I'm taking your music and I'm chopping it up. And I was a little leery about how he was going to react to that, but fortunately he said, no, that's fine. I really like what you did with that. So I said, cool. So we'll put that on the album because that I really dug. So I sequenced an album after a few months. I had brought in Matt Bliston to do a lot of horn parts with me. I brought in a guy named Larry Fratangelo, who was a percussionist that used to play with P-Funk. He came in and did percussion on it. And interestingly, there was a couple songs that I had re-edited and changed a lot. And I needed new piano solos on them that Prince had already done on these tracks before, that I'd basically chopped it up that what he had put on it wasn't going to work any longer. So I went to him and I said, Prince, I need you to come in and do a couple piano solos on 2 of these songs that I'm working on. And Prince said to me, says, I've been hearing, I would give him rough mixes as the stuff was going along, so he at least had some idea what I was doing with it. And he said, judging on what you're doing with this stuff, I'm not the guy for this. You need to call Ricky Peterson.
Mm.
Now, Ricky, of course, is Paul's older brother, keyboard player, who went on to do a lot of production work for Prince later. And, of course, has been David Sanborn's keyboard player. Ricky's a phenomenal keyboard player. Mm-hmm. He's out with Stevie Nicks right now, Okay. So, I mean, he's a first call pianist and keyboard, but just a marvelous jazz pianist also. And when Prince is coming to me and said, you don't need me for this, you need Ricky.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. I called Ricky, and Ricky came in and nailed it. Just brought a whole different thing to it. So that's Prince's respect, for hearing this and saying, oh, no, I'm not the guy you need for this. You need Ricky. So I said, well, if Prince says I need Ricky, I need Ricky. And Ricky came in and was cool. So I finished the album, I sequenced it, I had it mixed, and I gave it to Prince. And Prince called me a few days later, and he said, Eric, I really love everything that you've done on this. The only problem is, and I said, oh, boy, now what? When I hear him say, but, I said, oh, shit, okay, now what? He said, doesn't sound like a Madhouse album to me anymore. And I said, well, Prince, I kind of understand that, because you and me still are going to hear music differently. And although all of these tracks were your tracks to begin with, my sensibility and what I was going to do with them were going to be different than if you or I were working together in the studio, because you basically just gave it to me. So it's just going to be whatever I hear, and that's going to be significantly different enough from what you would do on it. So I'm thrilled that you like it, but what are you going to do with it? And he said, I'm going to release it under your name. Well, I couldn't argue, and I was like, oh, my God. So 2 days later, I had a contract for me. Eric Leeds is now,
Wow.
So that was going to be a Madhouse album, but then it turned into my first album, which was called Time Squared. And he said to me, you need one more song on it. We don't have quite enough. We're doing CDs now, so you need another song. So I went back in the studio and recorded a song of my own to throw on the album.
Which one was that?
Other than that one. It was the first song. It was called Lines. It was actually the first song on the CD. That was entirely. It was a song that I had written years before that I'd never gotten a chance to do anything with. But everything else was basically stuff that had begun with Prince. But that's what led into that. So basically, at that point, he said, and he said, it's not that we may never do anything under the Madhouse name again, but right now, you got it.
Right.
We'll release this under your name and take it from there. So, so that album came out, and then he gave me, like I say, the opportunity to do a second album, which was called Things Left Unsaid. Now, years later, I've got about 2 albums worth of stuff that he and I and Michael Bland and Sonny and Levi and Tommy Elm and different combinations recorded, ostensibly for Madhouse albums that never came out. So it's not like we couldn't have done, and actually some of that stuff was really, really nice. It was really cool shit, and I'm sorry that some of that stuff never came out, but,
I've heard a little bit of the ones with, I think it was Sonny and Michael and yourself.
Well, there was one song, actually there was one that we did call 17 that came out on a like a compilation CD. That was the only one that was, it was the only one that was officially released. Yeah, everything else has come out is bootleg, but yeah, that stuff gets out. So.
But that first the Eric Leeds album that you did, man, that was a dope album. I remember when that came out, and now I'm a Madhouse purist in the sense of like, so when I heard it, I was like, yeah, this ain't Madhouse, and it took me a second to accept it. Not that it wasn't good, it's just I was expecting a very certain different type of sound.
Right, exactly.
But when I started really getting into it, like the song Night Owl, I think it is.
Right.
Was that? That's cold stuff, man. Then just
I got a couple live versions of us doing that are off the hook.
Oh man, that song is. I mean, a lot of these songs is dope, man.
I throw that up on YouTube sometimes. Some of the live stuff.
You should.
With.
But yeah, that's a good.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Now, I mean, obviously, from my own personal standpoint, the second album that I did is the one that means the most to me. Now, I understand entirely why many of the Prince fans probably don't listen to that album as much as they might think, because there was nothing about Prince, in that, that was my Weather Report album. I mean, that's, and it was Weather Report's rhythm section on half of that album.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I did most of that album in New York, actually, with New York Cats.
Okay.
So I mean, that was entirely different. So that that's an album that if you're really expecting something like Madhouse or even Times Squared, that album isn't going to work for you. And I get that.
Real quick, just to go back to Madhouse for a second, and I wanted to talk about the reception that you guys got from those albums. And I remember, I think it was you and maybe it's Levi. You and Levi. I remember you guys went on Video Soul with Donnie Simpson.
Yeah, we were with Donnie Simpson. Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I remember when, and y'all had the. Was y'all wearing cloaks or hoods and stuff?
Yeah, we had those capes.
The capes. Yeah. Whose idea was that look? Was that Prince?
That was Prince's idea. I'm pretty sure that was Prince's idea. Yeah. And yeah, so we wore those. Now he had me wearing that cape on some of the on Sign of the Times for a while, and I hated wearing it because first of all it was very uncomfortable, and the cape it always got in the way of my hands. So it was difficult. So the cape was always in the way of my horns. I was always brushing it out of the way to try to play. So it was I couldn't stand wearing that thing. But it was it was the look.
Yeah, no, and you guys, and I have to shout out. How do you say old girl's name? Manisa.
Manisa. Yeah, Manisa Leitner.
Beautiful, like them covers unto themselves.
The covers are dope. Yeah.
Did you get to go to the photo shoot?
We did too. We did. No, I wasn't a part of. I wasn't around the photo shoot. I missed that. But we did 2 videos.
Yes.
And Matt Fink and I we played policemen in the videos.
Yes.
And Manisa is in the videos, and on the first one, for the song, I think it was for 10. I have to manhandle her a little bit.
All right now.
That was one of the more enjoyable video shoots. I tell you.
That's worth the whole thing right there. There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good Lord.
So I apologize for Manisa for having the manhandle, but she understood what the gig was. So.
And that reminds me, I have to ask you this. Speaking of videos, say you guys had 2 videos, and actually you guys, one of those videos was early appearance of, I guess, the Game Boys, like Tony M and them were in those videos. That was before they.
Well, they were actually in Purple Rain.
Purple Rain, right? That's true. That's right.
Yeah, just that one little shot of them. I think something. Yeah.
But I wanted to go back to your movie that you guys. Well, you were in the movie. I think the stars of it were Brooks and Wally.
Oh, right, yeah.
What was it, Hard Life? I think it was.
Yeah, Hard Life or something. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Talk to us about that. But I will say this: when the music though, I mean, they're playing the Madhouse in the it was fire, man. But that was an odd project, and it never officially came out. But what was going on with that?
It was just one of those things that Prince felt like doing one day.
Okay.
He just came to rehearsal one day and said, "Okay, we're gonna make a little movie today." So he hired a little film crew to come in, and we spent I think one afternoon or 2 afternoons doing that. And it was only going to be for his private use. It was never meant to, it was just for us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Were there other sort of project things like that we've never heard of that you guys did? Other little movies that?
Not that I can think of offhand.
Okay.
He might have. I've been told that occasionally he might have done something like that, maybe back in the early days. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe before my time. I'm not really sure.
There was, I think, there was a controversy thing he did. I've seen clips from it. Yeah. All right. So Madhouse. Now, talk to me about the live thing on Madhouse. I have one of your concert recordings from Germany where you guys opened up.
We did. We would do a 20-minute Madhouse set as the opening for the Sign of the Times gigs all through Europe.
Okay.
And the band, the working band, was me and Matt Fink, Levi, and the drummer was a guy named Dale Alexander, who was an old friend of Prince's. He'd known since he was a kid or something. Was the drummer on. Dale never played on any of the records. He was just the drummer we used on those live gigs. So we would do like a 20-minute set. To open up the Sign of the Times concert, and then we did several club gigs.
Yes,
Madhouse club gigs that would invariably end up being long. Madhouse would come out and play for like 45 minutes, and then Prince and whoever else in the band would get on stage, and then we'd jam for another hour. Whatever. So.
Yeah, and you would do like I heard you do In a Sentimental Mood.
I did that. Occasionally, I would do that just as a solo on some of the club gigs. Yeah, we didn't do it on the concert, but just at a club gig.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was just my way of showing everybody I could play some jazz too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Let me open it up to the guys. Did you guys have any other additional questions? Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions. So, I mean, you talked earlier, we were talking about the Miles Davis thing, and you said that, Prince was already familiar with a lot of Miles Davis's work that he had listened to. So I would assume that in a lot of the time that you were with him, that you and him probably had many discussions about other kinds of musicians. So I'm wondering, did you hip him to any particular jazz artists and albums? And like, if you did, like, which ones did he gravitate to? Which one did you notice that he really got into?
Yeah, I gave him a Love Supreme. I mean, he might have had a passing understanding of Coltrane, but I don't think that was an artist that he was that really much into. I gave him a Love Supreme, and for a while he was playing the hell out of that. He seemed to really dig that. I also gave him Duke Ellington live at Newport, the infamous album, famous album,
great
1956 with Dominion and Crescendo and Blue, the 27 blues chorus solo by Paul Gonsalves in the middle of that, and he absolutely loved that. And then some of the, the Miles stuff that he basically was aware of and listened to was some of the Gil Evans stuff, Sketches of Spain, Kind of Blue, of course.
Yeah.
Jack Johnson, some of the more, the electric stuff. He really wasn't that aware of the second quintet. So one Christmas, I gave him ESP, Miles Smiles, Sorcerer Nefertiti, Miles in the Sky, and Kilimanjaro as a Christmas gift.
Nice.
And I have no real knowledge to what extent he might have listened to that stuff. I'm sure he checked it out, but I don't really know to what extent that he really got into that era that much. But we would talk about Weather Report because he knew I absolutely love Weather Report, and I was very familiar with those guys. So we talk about Weather Report now and then, and he certainly was into Herbie Hancock and Headhunters and that stuff.
Nice.
He used to occasionally like to hear Alan talk to him about James Brown, of course. He was always fascinated about hearing James Brown stories.
And to what extent did you yourself personally get into the I know you were into the Bitches Brew and In a Silent Way. Like, how far into the Electric Miles period were you into? Like, were you into the At Fillmore stuff, On the Corner?
Absolutely.
Big Fun, all those albums?
I was diehard. I mean, I was even one of my few buddies that was into the Acid Funk band. The band with Pete Cosey and Reggie Lucas.
Yeah. I
freaking loved that band. I mean,
I already liked you, but see, now you just went up even more with me, man. I appreciate. I love that stuff. I had to get some of that stuff imported from Japan myself personally.
Well, the original album, Egg Heart and Pangea, the original albums I have are the Japanese imports. Oh yeah.
Yep.
I've Alan and I have over the years we have a collection, Alan and I, of about 150 Weather Report gig tapes, and we've got about probably a good 40 or 50 of Miles gigs from that band.
Oh man!
Over the years. And I tell you a funny thing. When I had dinner with Miles and Prince that night, one of the first things I wanted to talk to Miles about was that band, because that band was critically panned. Nobody liked that band. I mean, all the jazz writers, they hated band because they're a funk band. They didn't get it. And I asked Miles about that band, and Miles looked at me and laughed, and he said, "Eric, you like that band?" And I said, "Man, I love that band." And excuse me, he said, "You're the only motherfucker I've ever heard that liked that band. Nobody liked that band." And I said, "No, Miles, there were a few of us that, loved that band."
Yeah, damn straight.
Yeah.
Okay. One other last question. This is just one off, but one of my favorite Prince unreleased cuts that you guys played was Data Bank, and then right before your he gets into your part, he goes movie star, funky, nasty, drives an ugly car. What in the world kind of car were you driving that was so ugly that Prince had to put this in the song?
I love it.
Oh yeah, I guess I was still driving my little. I guess I was driving my little Mazda GLC. It was a Econo box.
Oh,
I was a bar band. I was a bar band musician for that. And, if I could have 4 wheels and 4 doors and a steering wheel, I was happy. Now I'll tell you a funny thing though. Here's a different perspective on that. It was like this was 1980. About a month or two after that, I bought a new car, so I got something that was a little hipper, but. But that car, this is it was a 1981 Mazda GLC. Just a little 4-door Ocano box. Mm-hmm. I actually took James Brown to the airport once in that car.
Mm. Well, and
go. James Brown loved it.
There you go.
He looked at me and he said, Rick, this your car? I said, yeah, Mr. Brown. He said, well, this is a sensible car. You're a smart young man. You're not buying all those fancy those gas hogs. You got a sensible car here. You're a smart young man. I was in hysterics. James Brown riding in like a little, coupe.
Wow.
He didn't care. Because it was James Brown. He said, I got to ride to the airport. That's all I care about. But yeah, no.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was my little silver gray GLC that Prince was.
I just always thought that was hilarious. Every time I hear that song, that's the way that he introduced, puts you to your solo, is to tell them to dish your car. That's crazy.
Yeah. No, that was that's fine. I got the solo.
That's true. You did. Awesome.
Well, I'll actually tell you. I'm sure you probably know this song. Probably, if anything, that I can offer the top of. I one day looked through my journals and counted up. I did over 150 recording sessions with him over the years, and I would say 90 to 95% of the stuff has never been released.
Wow.
And I have very little recollection. I mean, I could look back and I could look at, through my journal and tell you the titles of all these songs. I could no more tell you what this music sounded like. I mean, some of the stuff I have. Some of the stuff, some of the things I've got rough mixes on to some of this stuff, but most of it I don't. But I do have, fortunately, there was a song that we did. It was actually Wendy and Lisa's song, and I'm sure it was Searching for a Penny in a Room with no light.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of my favorite songs that I ever did with, that.
Awesome song.
I mean, yeah, that is just one of my favorite things that Prince ever recorded. But it was basically Wendy and Lisa's song. I think I suppose the lyrics were his, although I'm not really sure, but I guess they probably were. But it was Wendy and Lisa who basically put that song together, and with Sheila on drums on that.
Wow.
And I always loved that. But that song is very, very different. I'm hard pressed to think of any other Prince song that sounds anything like that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What did you think of his remake of it?
I've never heard it.
Oh. Yeah. Were you aware that he redid that?
I think somebody had mentioned it, but I've never heard it.
All right, yeah, that's one of those sort of holy grail songs to the fans. That there's like a very bad quality version circulating, but we want to hear like the studio quality.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the rough. I don't know if there was ever a final mix. I've got 3 different rough mixes on it.
Oh, wow.
That he gave me when we did it. That I hold on to. I am not somebody that gives out bootleg stuff. Not recorded stuff.
I hear you.
So if a live gig, because I've got a lot of live gigs. So probably all of the live gigs that I've got are already out there. That's one thing, because I mean that was the whole purpose was to play that music in front of people.
Right.
So, but I do have a philosophical thing about that regardless of how much any of us might have liked a recorded piece of music, that's up to the artist to determine whether it should be released. And for whatever reason that anything wasn't released, if I happen to have it, it's gonna that's gonna stay with me.
I can respect that. What do you think about unreleased music? I mean, going forward in terms of his legacy, and should his family or whatever start putting that out, or what do you think about that?
It's an interesting question because and I do know that Prince wasn't too thrilled with the idea of that with other artists, because there was so much of stuff that was in the Miles Davis catalog has been released over the years, and I remember once having a conversation about it. He was asking me once years and years ago. He said, "So what are you listening to now?" I said, "Well, I'm listening to the same old shit." But I said there was just a new compilation of Miles stuff that was just released from stuff that he'd recorded in the 60s and 70s that's just being released for the first time. And I said, "I'm just digging on that." And Miles has been dead for 10 years, and he said, and Prince said something, to lead me that isn't something that he approved of. I said, Miles is dead. Why are they releasing stuff now that. And I told Prince, I said, I don't think Miles ever had a problem with that, because they would release a lot of stuff that Miles had previously recorded, even when he was alive, that they would do without asking him. Miles, I never had any indication that Miles really cared. Miles wanted to get paid, because every time they released a new, stuff, that he was getting paid. So I think that's all Miles really cared about. So I really don't know. I mean, obviously, I think there's certainly stuff in the vault that would only add to Prince's legacy, but still, it's personal opinion. Because I could go in the vault and I could say, oh, I don't think that song should be released, and I think that song's just a bunch of crap. Another person might hear that and say, oh no, I think that should be released. I think that's great. So I mean, whose opinion matters? I don't really know. What I do know, and I've said this before, that most of the stuff that's in the vault is actually probably stuff that's unfinished, because Prince would go in the studio every day because that's all he knew what to do with himself. And since he had the ability to go into a studio almost any time he wanted, so it doesn't mean that every day he was really in there making great music. He was just doing what he does because that's all he knew what to do with himself. That's all he was really interested in doing. And a lot of times there was a process with him that he might spend days or weeks in the studio just doing different things, recording different pieces of music, and he might lose interest after a day. Well, that didn't go anywhere. I'll throw that aside. And usually it would be working to a point where he might have an idea for what he wanted the music of the next album to be about, and he would just start recording, and anything that came into his head, he was just like throwing up against the wall and see if it would stick. And over a period of time, then it might start to come together where all of a sudden he said, I've been in the studio just doing stuff, and now I got it in my head what I need to do. And that's the day that he would go in and record a song that might be, his next When Doves Cry, So there was a lot of it's just work product. It's just music that he records as part of the process for him to get from point A to point B. To get where it was that he's looking to get, and it might take him a while to get there. So that's what I really think is in the vault. Is a lot of just unfinished stuff that was just part of the process. So.
All right. Last few questions, and I really appreciate you giving us so much time here. Sure. Really respect that. I got a question here from your buddy Paul Peterson.
Okay.
He says, ask him what his favorite locomotive is and why. I don't know what that's about.
See, what Paul knows is that the only thing that I love more than the music that I love is trains and railroads.
Okay.
Since I was a little kid, the only thing that I could probably ever imagine being other than a musician was being a railroad engineer or something.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have train sets and stuff?
Oh, I did. I still got a lot of trains. They're all in storage. Wow. But I mean, if you come to my apartment, most of the books are all about trains. Wow. I got records and I got books about trains, and that's what and baseball. That's my other love in life is baseball.
All right.
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite locomotive, the Pennsylvania GG1, and no one's gonna know what that means other than somebody that knows anything about trains. So.
Hey, we got Google.
So if there's anything, the pencil, they'll know what I mean. The rest of it, I understand you don't have a clue. I'll leave it at that.
We'll look it up online. We'll Google it. We'll
Google
learn.
it. Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to ask you about some of the new musicians. Now this guy I'm going to mention, he's not new, but D'Angelo. I saw a great video. This was years ago now. It was you were on stage with D'Angelo. Jesse Johnson was up there. You guys were doing My Summertime thing.
Well, that was actually Questlove's gig. It was at the Bonnaroo Festival.
Yes,
the big festival they do in Nashville every year, and it was a special all-star group that Questlove put together.
Okay.
So it was Questlove, D'Angelo, Jesse, myself, Kirk Douglas, Poiser on guitar on keyboards, and Pino Palladino on bass.
Okay.
So it was it was a pretty good group. Yeah, we rehearsed that afternoon, threw it together, and went up and did the gig. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm asking this because it's kind of some of my opinions, but I'm just curious. When I look at a guy like D'Angelo, who I'm a huge fan of, love D'Angelo's stuff.
That's Alan is D'Angelo's manager.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And in some regards, let me be very careful. I'm not saying that he is the next Prince or any of that sort of thing, but in terms of black R&B with where the guys up front, and the band and that whole thing, to me, he sort of was a resurgence to bring that to the forefront at least. And he's a very soulful artist.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and I mean, he's always had killer bands, well, Prince is his guy.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. I know he's a heavy Prince fan, because I can just hear it in his vocals and everything he does. Sure. What do you see in terms of like a D'Angelo, and even a current guy right now who I really dig is like a Bruno Mars. I don't know if you heard his newer stuff.
I've got to be absolutely honest with you.
Please be.
I no longer have interest in music.
Really? You got to be joking.
I mean, as far as the music that I love, which was basically R&B, and jazz. I still listen to some young jazz artists, but I don't seek out new music any longer. Which doesn't mean that if I stumbled upon something that I wouldn't enjoy it. It's just that for me, I've heard it all. And so it's like I suspect that if I was going to say, okay, I'm going to spend a few days and just seek out new artists, whether it's Bruno Mars or anybody else, I'm sure there's some stuff that I would enjoy, but it's not essential to me any longer. And I guess that's a function of just my age, as much as anything. Although Alan is actually a little older than I, but he's still more, is more interested in seeking out newer artists and things like that. I just, like I say, pretty much everything I've heard before. So even if it's a distinctive voice or a distinctive way of looking at it, it just doesn't really have that much of a purpose for me any longer. And there's still so much, particularly in jazz. I'm still trying to fill up the spaces in my catalog of my old Freddie Hubbard collection, or Horace Silver and guys that that along the way is music I haven't filled up or whatever, and I can go back and find that stuff because that stuff is still new to me if I haven't heard it before. And also at this point, I spend more time concentrating on music that's really the kind of music that I really want to play. So my perspective is a little different. So D'Angelo, I have an awful lot of respect for. I mean, he's got great music and great bands. I mean, the bands he puts together are killer. But it's just that it just doesn't. I just don't see, for me personally, it just doesn't really have that much of a purpose any longer. And I can't say I miss it, because there's still, I'm sitting in my studio right now and I'm looking at my collection. I'm looking right now at over 2,000 albums, wow. on my, and about 85% of them are jazz albums. And I could spend the rest of my life just, you see, the thing about, the greatest music for me, like the greatest stuff of Miles, is that even though I've listened to Sorcerer and Nefertiti and those albums probably hundreds of times, I can still hear something in them that I've never heard before, Okay. And that's the nature of what that music means for me. Now, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is that there's another music that is probably, for me, the most perfect genre of music that's ever been conceived, and it's Afro-Cuban music. My favorite living musician in all the world is Eddie Palmieri. Now a lot of people don't know who the hell he is, but I mean, he's like the combination of Miles and Prince and John Coltrane and Monk, and conceptually for Afro-Cuban music. Guy's 80 years old, and he still makes music like he's 20 years old, and.
Oh, you there?
Who we lose?
We lost Eric. 1 second. Call him back up. Maybe his phone died or something. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get him back on here. Maybe we won't. I don't know what's going on. He just died on us.
Well, yeah, we can make it a 3-part thing.
We had 4 hours. This might be a record, Mike.
I know, right? Okay. Hello.
Yeah, I think we got. Yeah, I think my phone might have gone dead or something.
I kind of figured that's okay. We can wrap up here, but you were talking about this artist. So I just wanted to let you finish that.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just for me. There's still so much of the music that I grew up with and the artists that are still so compelling for me that I'm still into. So for me, it just really hasn't seemed. There just hasn't really been that much of a reason for me to want to really seek out new music. Which, maybe sometime I should. Like I said, I'm sure I'll probably could find some things, but I can't really answer the question about having a favorite because it's just not kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. We must also quickly wanted to talk about F Deluxe and get an update on what's going on with that. Now, you guys have put out, I want to say, is it 2 albums?
We've actually put out 4.
4. Sorry.
When we got back together, the purpose was to do new music. Mm-hmm. Because the opportunity. Because when we decided to get back together, I told Paul and Susanna, I said, I don't have a clue as to what kind of music you guys can write. At least for something like this. And I said, if all you're going to do is just bring music that reminds me of what the Family album was, I'm not going to be interested because been there, done that. And the music that they were writing, I thought was so cool, and it was really interesting for me to try to do my thing on that. So the first album that was called Gaslight, I absolutely love that album. But that's Paul and Susanna and Wendy and Lisa wrote a couple things for that too. And then we did a companion CD that came out, which was a bunch of remixes of some of the stuff from that called Relit. Mm-hmm. And then we did a live CD called Live and Tight. And then we did an album a couple of years ago called AM Static, which is kind of an album of covers. That was kind of interesting. Yeah. So we're kind of in limbo right now because. We're not signed to a record company. We're all doing this independently. So it's like we got to put some bucks aside every now and then and be able to get everybody together and go in the studio. And Suzanne, of course, lives out in L.A. and she's got a band of her own. It's her and her 2 daughters. I mean, that's her life. So and Paul was on the road all last year playing bass with Peter Frampton of all things. So but we're looking to try to continue with that, and I'm excited about that always because I just love the music that Paul and Susanna write. And then Paul and I have our own thing called LP Music, which is an instrumental jam band. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like I guess it would be kind of like if Madhouse under the direction of Eric Leeds. It's my music per se, but it's kind of that same, a little bit more of an open-ended thing. And we've done quite a few successful gigs around town here, and we're looking to go in the studio within the next couple months and start to do some recording to try to get something to put out with LP Music. And that's kind of what I'm really looking for. I got to tell you, having gotten to know Paul as well as I have, besides just the fact that he's just absolutely one of the most wonderful people I know. He is absolutely one of the most brilliant musicians I've ever worked with. I mean, Paul is just ridiculous. He really is. So the opportunity to be able to work with him is something I really cherish. I also want to put a shout out to that I don't know, you might be aware of. I spoke briefly about this band that I was in with Sheila in the mid-'90s we called the E-Train. Mm-hmm. That was it was just an absolutely fabulous band. And the bass player in that band was a fellow by the name of Mark van Wackenhagen. Mark is the bass player with Tower of Power who was hit by the train a couple weeks ago.
Oh, right. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And Mark is one of my closest musical buddies and also one of the most incredible bass players I've ever known. And he is recovering. He's in the hospital. I mean, he was injured extremely seriously. I mean, Dave Garibaldi was hit by the train also. Mm-hmm. He was seriously hurt. But Mark was really, really, injured very, very critically for a while, and he is recovering. It's going to be a long, long recovery for him, but I just want to put out a shout-out because Mark is just one of the greatest people and one of the finest musicians that I work with. And once again, my ability to know Sheila, leads me to the ability to know somebody like Mark. So it's, that's another wonderful legacy of being involved with Prince, is all these other wonderful musicians that I've gotten to know over the years. So anyway.
Okay. Wow. And what was his name again? I'm sorry, Mark. What was the last name?
Mark van Wacheniggen. He's from Amsterdam, so go online. It's the name is spelled as two words, VAN, and the second word is WAG. ENG. Oh God, I gotta write it out.
We'll
anyway, you can find it. Yeah.
And I just want to double down on the shout out to St. Paul, man. We got to get him on the show too, man. So
absolutely,
I got some things I got to talk to that brother about. No, it's all good.
Susanna would be
Susanna
would be somebody interesting to talk to because aside from obviously the personal relationship we had with Prince, but just. Susanna's a real artist. I mean, she really is. She's an incredible musician, and like her sister, obviously. But Susanna could give you a lot of insight about what, certain aspects of Prince, the artist, that I couldn't give you. Because we all had different perspectives because the nature of our relationship was always a little bit different.
Right.
So Susanna is somebody, along with Wendy and Lisa, but particularly Susanna could probably give you some insight about the nature of Prince's artistry that I don't think you necessarily could get just from even the people that played with him in the band. It's a different perspective. For sure. It's really, really interesting. So that I need
them all, man. We gotta get them all. We gotta. Wow. This has been, like I said, eye opener here. But I love your frankness, man. I have to admit.
Well, I appreciate that, and like I say, the bottom line for me is that at the end of the day, I was just so fortunate to have been thrown into an opportunity that wasn't anything that I necessarily would have aspired, to have. I give it up to my brother. He just said, man, come do this because the guy's a remarkable musician, and that's what you're going to get out of it. And he was absolutely right. And obviously, even if it had just been that, it would have been cool. But obviously, the opportunity that he gave me to do my own music and all the other wonderful people that I knew because of that I can't. You can't put a dollar figure on that. That's worth more than all the money that he paid me. So.
All right. Well, man, like I said earlier, it's such a blessing to hear your playing on the music. To me, it's like when I hear the Prince stuff that has your horn lines and whatever, it's official. It's like, okay, this is what I grew up listening to, so I love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Respect your musicianship and the kind of cat that you seem to carry yourself. You seem like a real humble, cool dude. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, all of you. Big Sexy, Big Kent, thank you also.
Yes, sir.
It was a privilege to talk to you, Eric.
Cool.
Eric, let me go ahead and say this one quick thing as a fan. There is one version of Nothing Compares to You, and it has your sax on it. Nothing else matters.
Oh, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir.
All right, man. Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you another time.
All right. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to run my mouth.
Oh, man. We love it, brother. Trust me. All right, man.
All right, man.
I'll talk to you later. Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. The great Eric Leeds. There's a lot to digest. I would suggest a second listen, couple listens to get it all in. Of course, big shout out, man, to Big Ken for coming back and joining us with this. Man, you brought a lot to the table. Thank you, sir.
It was great, man. It was really nice to talk to him. He's a real cool guy, too.
Yeah, he's hilarious. He's funny.
Yeah, he is. He keeps it 100. He keeps it 100. There's no doubt about that.
That's true. Shout out, of course, to Big Sexy and Sax, sir. Thank you, sir.
The guy was great. And it's funny because because you don't hear a lot of interviews from him in the media. So I thought we'd have to pull stuff out of him. No, Eric had something to say. It was great.
Nah, he's a great storyteller, man. All right, we're going to get up out of here. But as we get out, man, I want to make sure that I always shout out everybody else that's out there doing something in the Prince world, in the community, and keeping the information and just keeping the whole vibe flowing. So quick shouts to Peach and Black. Shout out to Dr. Funkenberry. Shout out to the Org, to the Purple Underground. Shout out to my guy Casey Rain, and just shout out to everybody, the Prince Army that's doing their thing. And if I forgot anybody, please, I'm just in the moment, so don't take that as anything. But let's keep this thing rolling. With that, man, we got to get up out of here. Work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Peace.